The galaxy groaned as it always had in pain, in fire, and in silence. But on the desolate forge world of Carthian IX, something new was born. It began as a whisper in the void, a tremor in the fabric between universes. The Adeptus Mechanicus recorded it as an anomalous magnetic surge, a pulse so powerful that even the machine spirits screamed. In truth, it was a doorway torn open by an accident of cosmic probability, or perhaps by fate itself, and through that tear stepped a man wrapped in metal. He did not fall. He drifted, carried gently by the currents of magnetism that seemed to obey his will. His armor was alien, his face lined with age and conviction. His name, once spoken in another universe with awe and fear alike, was Eric Lenscher. The galaxy would soon know him as Magneto. At first, he thought he had fallen into another mutant world. The air burned with radiation, the soil was black glass, and the sky hung heavy with orbital debris. His powers reached outward instinctively, and the entire planet responded. He could feel the veins of iron beneath the crust. He could hear the machine spirits angry, trapped, enslaved. He could sense a colossal structure above him, a cathedral of steel that pulsed with sacred code. He reached out with his hand, and the Mechanicus forges bent toward him like grass in the wind. Within minutes, entire manufactorums collapsed under the invisible tide. Servo arms twisted into spirals. Servo skulls fell lifeless from the air. The priests of Mars screamed binary prayers to their god as Magneto walked through clouds of molten metal, untouched. When they finally saw him, robed and shining, they fell to their knees. The Omnissiah walks among us. Magneto looked down at the robed figure trembling before him, half man, half machine. The Magos's voice stuttered through vox emitters as he chanted rites of reverence. You have command over the sacred metal. You are the flesh-made code. Magneto's lips curved faintly. He had been called many things: savior, terrorist, mutant, god, but never before had anyone knelt to him in worship. He raised his hand. A broken Titan engine in the distance shuddered, plates of adamantium fusing back together, gears whirling with life. The tech priests gasped in ecstatic horror. Rise, Magneto said softly. If your god is the machine, then I am its truth. As the hours passed, he explored the ruins of Carthian IX. He saw children born without limbs, replaced by crude augmetics. He saw laborers chained to conveyor belts, bleeding into furnaces they called holy, and with every sight, his fury grew. This Imperium, this empire of man, enslaved its own kind beneath superstition and fear. He had fought such tyranny before, in another age, on another Earth. Once again, he murmured, the weak worship their chains. He raised his arms. The sky turned red. Orbiting debris reassembled itself into a vast magnetic storm, a halo of iron surrounding the planet. Vox systems malfunctioned across the sector. The Imperial Navy above Carthian reported impossible readings, an artificial magnetic field forming a planetary shield. The machine god had a new voice. Deep within the forges, the Mechanicus began to argue. Some declared him divine. Others called him a heretic of the Omnissiah. A schism was born in a single night, one that would tear through logic engines and faith alike. Meanwhile, on Terra, the psychic echoes reached the Golden Throne. The Emperor's servants recorded a disturbance that rippled through the warp, not demonic, not psychic, but something that twisted reality through physical law. An entity of metallic dominion, said one astropath before her mind burned out. In the warp, the Chaos Gods turned their gaze for the briefest of moments, curious. A mortal who commanded not the soul, but the very bones of the material world. Tsiench laughed softly. Back on Carthian IX, Magneto stood atop a rebuilt tower, his cloak torn and his armor glowing crimson in the reflected fires. Before him stretched an army of servitors and broken machines, all reshaped into new forms, sleek, symmetrical, untainted by the Imperium's crude reverence. He spoke to them not as slaves, but as soldiers. You have served machines that did not care for you. You have prayed to masters who deafened themselves with their own arrogance. But I am not your god. I am the will that will free you from them. And for the first time in millennia, the forges of Carthion roared not with worship, but with rebellion. Yet somewhere deep in the void, an imperial transmission pulsed toward Holy Terra. A single message, a single word: Omnissiah. returned. The news of the magnetic god spread through the Forge world like a virus through code. Every transmission, every mechanical prayer, every data stream whispered his name. Magneto, the living will of the Omnissiah, returned in flesh and fury. Across the blackened deserts of Carthian Nyx, pilgrim processions of tech priests, servitors, and cyber-slaves crawled toward the great forges reborn under his power. They came dragging mechanical relics, offering their metal limbs in sacrifice. And above them, Magneto stood within his newly built fortress, a citadel of twisted iron and hovering debris suspended by invisible force. Its spires hummed with magnetic energy, their tips glowing red like the eyes of a machine god watching its creation. He looked down at the endless crowd below. He saw desperation, faith, and fear intertwined. He had seen this before in humans who worshipped mutants for salvation, in those who feared him enough to kneel. "They never change," he murmured. "They always need gods." A delegation of the Mechanicus approached him, led by Archmagos Threxion, a being more metal than man. His voice came through layers of distortion, each word laced with static reverence. "Lord of Magnetism," the Archmagos intoned, "your mastery of ferrous and non-ferrous matter defies all known schema." The cult Mechanicus kneels before the Omnissiah made manifest. Magneto's gaze hardened. He raised his hand, and the Archmagos' mechanical body began to vibrate, plates shifting, bolts unscrewing themselves. "Do not mistake power for divinity," Magneto said softly. "Your god is the prison you built for yourselves. I am no one's idol." With a gesture, he released the Magos, who fell to his knees, not from reverence, but from terror. "Then what are you?" the tech priest whispered. "A man who refuses to bow." For days, Magneto restructured Carthian Nyx. The factories once devoted to war now forged tools for liberation. Chains melted into spears, production quotas turned into revolution. He freed the servitors, disabling their control implants. Some wept, though their voices were broken, static and oil. He spoke to the Mechanicus with sermons unlike any they had ever heard. "You enslave yourselves to machines because you fear imperfection. Yet perfection is the death of freedom. I will give you chaos, not of the warp, but of will. The freedom to disobey." The machine cult was split in two. Half worshipped him as the true Omnissiah. The other half called him a blasphemer, a daemon wearing metal flesh. Skirmishes erupted across the planet's forges. Binary hymns turned to screams, data cathedrals burned. Magneto watched from his tower, his crimson cloak billowing in the iron wind. He felt no joy, only inevitability. "They were slaves before me," he said. "Now they fight to decide whose chains they prefer." One night, as the skies thundered with orbital lightning, Archmagos Threxion returned, his body rebuilt, taller, sharper, half consumed by logic engines. "Magneto," Threxion declared, "you are proof that divinity is data. You are the next stage of the machine god's evolution. Let us upload your essence into the noosphere. You will become eternal code." Magneto turned to face him. His eyes glowed faintly red, reflecting the storm above. "You speak of eternity as if it were a gift. But eternity in servitude is still a cage." The Archmagos extended a mechadendrite tipped with an injector of glowing nanites. "Submit to the upload." "No," Magneto said and raised his hand. The entire hall screamed. Every servo arm, every data loom, every fragment of circuitry obeyed his will. Threxion's body twisted, torn apart in a silent implosion of metallic shards. When it was over, Magneto stood alone amid a blizzard of molten iron. "I warned you," he whispered. "The machine serves man, not the other way around." Word of his defiance reached the stars. Mechanicus fleets broke from Mars, declaring a holy reclamation. Imperial commanders labeled him a techno-heretic of the highest order. But among the lower castes of the Imperium, the miners, the laborers, the half-cybernetic outcasts, his legend spread like fire. They called him the Liberator of Steel, the Magnetic Prophet, the Omnissiah Unbound. Across distant worlds, augmetic workers painted crude sigils of magnetism over the Aquila, whispering his name in forbidden prayer. And in the void between stars, something vast stirred a ripple that even the Emperor's watchful mind began to feel. Back on Carthian Nyx, Magneto stood upon his citadel, gazing up at the darkness of space. The stars seemed to hum faintly to him, threads of magnetic song, connecting worlds like notes in a vast symphony. He closed his eyes. He could sense every ship orbiting the planet, their hulls vibrating with his call. He could feel the weapons aimed at him. "Let them come," he said quietly. "I have faced empires before." The sky ignited. Orbital bombardment rained upon the planet, and Magneto raised his arms. Every shell stopped mid-air. Every missile froze in place, suspended in a magnetic lattice. For a moment, time itself seemed to halt, and with a flick of his fingers, he sent them all back. The heavens exploded in silence. When the smoke cleared, only one thing remained untouched: the citadel of Magneto, glowing like a crimson star in the night. To the survivors, he was no longer a man. He was a force of nature, a god sculpted from vengeance and will. But Magneto knew the truth. He was still a man, and in this universe of blind worship and endless war, that was the most dangerous thing he could be. The warp shuddered. Across 1,000,000 psychic channels, the Astronomicon flickered a faint disruption, like a heartbeat misfiring in the body of the Imperium. On Terra, within the Golden Throne's chamber, the Emperor's silent awareness turned toward the source of the disturbance. A world of iron, a magnetic storm that defied both physics and faith, and at its center a single human mind, blazing with the arrogance of a god: Magneto. In the shadowed halls of the Inquisition's bastion, alarms flared. Vox scribes transmitted reports of planetary heresy, of a metal-wielding Messiah reshaping Carthian IX into a fortress. Mechanicus fleets were vanishing in its orbit. Pilgrims were mutating into zealots. To most, it was a rebellion. To the Emperor, it was something else. A new frequency hummed across the Imperium, one not born of psychic energy, but of law-made will. It bent steel, not souls. It silenced machine spirits. It challenged the very foundations of the Mechanicum's faith. For the first time in centuries, the Emperor's unseen lips formed a single thought: another god, born from man's arrogance. On Titan, the fortress monastery of the Grey Knights, the Order received its command. A strike team was to descend upon Carthian 9, not to negotiate, but to eradicate. They came from the void in silence, cloaked in psychic wards and purity seals. Their landing shattered the night. Magneto watched their drop pods streak across the sky like meteors. His eyes glowed red. He whispered, almost fondly, "They've sent angels again." He extended his hands, and the heavens froze. Every drop pod's hull screamed as it bent, molten under the strain of magnetic reversal. A dozen pods detonated mid-air, spiraling into blossoms of light, but some made it through silver meteors slamming into his citadel. The Grey Knights emerged, armored in sanctified silver, halos of psychic flame radiating from their forms. Magneto felt the pressure in his mind, not of metal, but of faith made manifest. "Halt, abomination!" cried the Justicar, his voice echoing like thunder. "You defile the Omnissiah's will." Magneto smirked, raising a hand. The knight's armor groaned, joints twisting, servos whining. "Your god's will," Magneto said, "is built from the same iron that obeys me." He clenched his fist. The Grey Knight was lifted from the ground, armor bending inward, purity seals catching fire until his psychic shield flared like a dying sun and shattered. The man fell, broken, but Magneto underestimated what he faced. As he turned to the others, he felt something else, a pressure that wasn't physical. A psychic storm built inside his skull, like 1,000 knives of light piercing his mind. The Justicar's voice came again, calm and merciless. "You command metal, we command the soul." The world cracked open. Reality bled. Magneto saw visions not of this galaxy, but of others. Endless wars, daemons screaming through the warp. He saw angels of gold weeping fire. He saw a throne of bones and light. He staggered. For the first time, his power faltered. "What is this?" he gasped. "The Emperor's gaze," whispered a voice in his head. "The light that burns false gods." He screamed not from pain, but from fury. He refused to kneel. The battle became a symphony of contradictions, psychic lightning clashing with magnetic storms. The ground split open as Carthian IX itself screamed under the tension. Machines turned against their masters. Grey knights were crushed, melted, or thrown across the horizon, yet for each one that fell, another stood unbroken, chanting holy code. Omnissiah, protect us. By the Emperor's decree, no flesh shall rule the machine. Magneto's fortress collapsed under the bombardment. He floated above the ruins, his body wreathed in red and violet light. Caught between the physical and the psychic, between law and madness, he reached out, and for an instant, he touched the warp itself. It answered. Voices whispered from beyond comprehension. Not divine, not mechanical, hungry. You are one of us, they murmured. A being of power who thinks himself pure. You could be eternal. Magneto saw the shapes, the Chaos Gods watching him with interest. Khorne laughed at his wrath. Tzench admired his control. Slaanesh whispered promises of perfection. Nurgle offered immortality in decay. For the first time in his life, Magneto felt something close to fear and disgust. No, he spat. I am not your puppet. Not his, not yours. I am free. He tore himself from the warp's grasp, severing the link through sheer will. The storm ended. The planet fell silent. When the smoke cleared, the Grey Knights found only wreckage, a mountain of twisted iron where the citadel once stood. No corpse, no signal, only silence and the lingering hum of magnetism in the air, like the echo of a god who refused to die. They returned to Terra with a single report. Subject: Magneto, uncontained. Current status: ascended anomaly. Recommendation: exterminatus if re-emergence occurs. The file was sealed under inquisitorial order. On Terra, in the flickering light of the Golden Throne, the Emperor stirred once more. For a heartbeat, his eyes opened, twin suns burning across eternity. A mortal who denies divinity, he thought. Perhaps the last honest man. Then the light faded, and the Imperium continued to rot in ignorance and war. But somewhere, in the cold void between stars, metal began to sing again. A quiet resonance, soft as prayer, strong as truth. Magneto lived, and the galaxy, for the first time, began to question whether the machine god truly belonged to Mars, or to the will of one man. The void between stars was silent, but inside that silence, something moved. Fragments of shattered ships drifted across the ruins of Carthian Nines, circling a single red sphere of light, the last remnant of Magneto's fortress. The Grey Knights had left, convinced the anomaly was destroyed, but within that sphere, the man they sought still lived, suspended in a cocoon of molten iron, heart beating like a magnetic pulse. He dreamed, and in that dream, voices came. At first, they were whispers, the soft hiss of current through wire. Then they became words, layered upon words, forming a chorus that twisted through his thoughts. You were born from pain. You have shaped worlds. You could reshape all of them. He saw visions of chaos, worlds burning, machines rising against flesh, gods fighting gods. And in the midst of it stood a figure with his face, a version of himself crowned in thorns of steel, his hands drenched in magnetized blood. You are not a man, the voice of Tzench whispered. You are the pattern, the hand that rewrites destiny. Another voice, deep and resonant, like the grinding of mountains. Khorne laughed. You are war given form. Strike, and become eternal. Then came the sickly warmth of Nurgle, offering comfort. You could heal them all, end their pain, let them decay in peace. And finally, the seductive hum of Slaanesh. Perfection is not control, Magneto. It is surrender. The four spoke as one. Join us. You need only choose which god you wish to become. Magneto's mind burned. He had seen madness before, in men, in nations, in gods, but never like this. They offered him everything he had ever wanted: control, purpose, peace. And yet, he opened his eyes. You mistake me, he said softly, his voice vibrating through molten metal. I do not wish to rule your chaos. I wish to end it. The voices screamed. The sphere shattered. Magneto rose once more. His body, reforged by raw magnetism, glowed faintly, armor reshaped from the very wreckage of the Grey Knights' ships. His face was older, his eyes darker, and the air around him bent as if space itself feared him. He looked upon the planet below, a wasteland of fire and broken faith. He could sense billions across the galaxy, kneeling before false gods, blind emperors, and machines that enslaved their own makers. "I tried to save men from gods," he said, "but perhaps men no longer deserve saving." Still, a flicker of conscience remained fragile, defiant. He turned away from the voices of the warp and began to build. In the heart of the dead world, Magneto raised a new fortress not of worship, but of reason. He called it the Bastion of Will. Here, he gathered the broken, outcasts, heretics, servitors freed from their codes, soldiers who had seen too much of the Emperor's light. They followed him not as disciples, but as equals. He taught them to reshape the tools of war into creations of defense. He constructed floating cities powered by magnetic resonance, where humans and machines coexisted without creed or crown. The warp storms receded around his domain, as if even the Imperium itself respected his discipline, and in that calm, a legend began to spread again. To some, he was a new Primarch forged from lost knowledge, sent to remind humanity of its strength. To others, he was a blasphemy, a demon who had bent reality without faith. To his followers, he was simply Eric, the man who taught them to stand upright in a galaxy of kneeling souls. But peace cannot last in the 41st millennium. The Imperium discovered the Bastion of Will, and the High Lords of Terror decreed his existence intolerable. To rule without divine authority was heresy. To free servitors was rebellion. To teach independence was treason. A crusade was declared. From the void came the golden fleets of the Imperium. Banners of the Aquila stretched across the stars, tens of thousands of ships burning with the Emperor's fury. And from the other side, unseen but always watching, came whispers from the warp, the chaos gods amused by the irony of it all. "He builds order in a realm of madness," Siench laughed. "He will drown in the tides he denies." The armies of man descended upon his world. The sky ignited again. Millions of troops fell upon the magnetic fortress. But this time, Magneto did not fight alone. From the floating citadels, his followers rose armed not with bolters, but with will. Magneto stood among them, hands spread, magnetic fields shimmering across the battlefield like curtains of red lightning. Last shots froze mid-air. Orbital strikes were turned into brilliant storms of metallic rain. Tanks rose from the ground, crushed like paper. And when Space Marines descended in their drop pods, he pulled the iron from their armor, atom by atom, until they stood bare before him, frightened men beneath gilded masks. "You serve a corpse," Magneto said. "I serve the living." The war raged for weeks. The warp itself bent around the conflict, echoing with the laughter of gods and the screams of the dying. In the end, there was no victory, only ruin. But among the ruins, Magneto stood unbroken, surrounded by the few who had survived, staring up at a sky torn by fire. "The Imperium offers only chains," he said. "Chaos offers only madness." He looked to the stars, endless, cold, and silent. "Then I will walk between them." And as he rose into the heavens, metal swirling around him like wings of iron, his voice carried across the Vox networks of dying ships. "Tell your Emperor, tell your gods, there is another path." The stars were bleeding. Every ship above Carthian Ix burned like a dying candle, their wreckage drifting through the void like a field of shattered prayers. And in the center of that field, a single world still glowed red, wrapped in an ever-shifting lattice of magnetism and ruin. It was no longer a planet. It was a monument. They called it the Iron Star, the final creation of Magneto, the god who refused to be one. When the last crusade came, it was not a war, it was judgment. The Primaris Crusade fleet, led by Captain Helion Varus of the Ultramarines, descended through the magnetic storm. The Emperor's order was absolute. Erase the anomaly, leave no atom unpurged. Varus had fought daemons, xenos, and traitors across 10,000 worlds, but he had never faced a man who could command the raw essence of the universe. As his strike force entered the atmosphere, their systems screamed, auspex scrambled, armor plates vibrating, weapons drawn from their hands by invisible force. Then the storm parted. Magneto stood alone upon a plain of molten steel, cloak torn by the wind, his eyes two dying suns. "You've come to finish what gods could not," he said. "Tell me, Captain, how many worlds have you burned in the name of order?" Varus raised his blade. Order is survival. You are corruption. Magneto smiled faintly. Then let us see which survives. The battle began with silence, then thunder. Bolt of fire exploded across the plain. Dozens of Primaris warriors charged forward, chanting the Emperor's name. But Magneto moved like a storm-given flesh. He tore the iron from the earth, forged it mid-air into spinning blades of metal, and sent them slicing through ceramite. Every shell that neared him bent away. Every missile curved into the sky. He fought not with rage, but precision, each gesture, a law of nature rewritten. Varus leapt into the air, his jump pack flaring blue, descending like a meteor. Their clash shook the world. The captain's blade, wreathed in plasma, struck Magneto's shield, the impact lighting the horizon. Magneto countered, pulling the very blood iron from the ground, forming a lance of raw metal that impaled the soil where Varus had stood moments before. "You fight for a corpse," Magneto growled. "You kneel to a throne of rust and silence. And you fight for nothing," Varus answered. "You would let the galaxy drown in its own freedom." The words struck deeper than the blades. For the briefest instant, Magneto hesitated. He saw, in Varus's burning eyes, the same conviction he once saw in Charles Xavier, the belief that order, no matter how cruel, was necessary for mankind's survival. The hesitation cost him. The captain drove his blade forward, cutting through Magneto's armor. Blood hissed into steam. Magneto staggered, his breath ragged, his body screaming against gravity. Varus raised his sword for the final strike. "You are not a god," he said. "No," Magneto whispered, his voice trembling with exhaustion. "But I have walked among them." He unleashed everything. The sky tore open. Every fragment of iron within miles rose screaming into the air. The world convulsed beneath him, tectonic plates fracturing as the planet's core answered his call. Mountains lifted, ships broke apart in orbit, and even the stars seemed to bend toward the fury of his field. The battlefield became a sphere of red-white light, metal, flame, and will intertwined. The Imperium's sensors went blind. Vox channels drowned in static. At the center of it all, Magneto stood, bleeding, dying but unbroken. He looked at the captain, now kneeling beneath the crushing force, armor cracking like glass. "I wanted to save men from gods," Magneto said, "but they begged for them instead." He closed his eyes. "Then let this be their final shrine." The explosion was silent. From orbit, it looked like a star had been born where Carthion once stood, a perfect sphere of iron and light, humming softly in the void. When the light faded, the world was gone. In its place remained a single object, an artificial star of condensed metal, orbiting in eternal stillness. No life, no death, only will. The Imperium would later classify it as a forbidden zone, the magnetic anomaly, a celestial weapon without origin. Psychers who gazed upon it in the warp reported hearing a single voice, distant but clear. "I am the law of matter. I am the silence between gods." Centuries passed. Pilgrims came. Scholars whispered. The Mechanicus called it the Omnissiah's tomb. The Inquisition called it a curse. But the outcasts, the forgotten men of the Imperium, called it hope. They said the star still sang, faintly, like the hum of magnetism across the bones of the galaxy. They said that somewhere within it, a man still dreamed not of conquest, but of peace. "He did not die," one pilgrim wrote. "He became balance itself,